Hello, everybody. Welcome to Module 3. This week, we have something that I think if you have taught reading a lot, it's an area that sometimes we neglect in reading. And we're going to be looking at viewing and visually representing and interpreting information. So looking at those skills related to visual literacy. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And so the first thing I want to do is I have a little a PowerPoint I want to share with you and talk to you about. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Okay, so like I said, we are looking at visual literacy. And so let's go ahead and start. So teaching visual literacy. So let's go ahead and start. So here is a picture of a story that I hope you maybe know, A Snowy Day by Ezra Keats. And just looking at this illustration, I kind of want you to think about what story do you see? What emotions or clues stand out? If you are from the North, like I am, I lived in Indiana. I remember, and I also have lived in New York, upstate New York, where we got these snow drifts, and I've lived in North Dakota where we had huge snow drifts like this. And I remember those snow drifts, and you can see this is a picture of a snow angel. So it's making snow angels. So if you've lived in the North, you maybe remember laying in the snow and making those snow angels. So as you look at an illustration like this, what's the story? What emotions, what clues stand out in the story? And so when we look at visual literacy, we're trying to get kids to think about how the pictures, illustrations, how to interpret those. And we interpret literary pictures, and we also look at informational things like charts and graphs and so forth. Let's look at another example. So I'm going to go back up here because I think I was, make sure you're seeing what I see. Okay, here we go. So this is another very popular book by Jacqueline Woods, The Other Side, and we can see the fence here, and we can see we have children on the fence. Literally on the fence. And it says, what does the fence represent in the illustration? And how does its meaning change when the girls sit together on it? And this is an example. If you've read this book, you know that it's called The Other Side of the Fence. And you have an African-American girl looking across the fence at this white girl. And they know because of the times, they're not allowed to play together. But now we see everybody playing together. And so one thing that you could talk to your students about is, what does that fence represent? What's the symbolism that it represents? How does the meaning change now that everybody is sitting on the fence? So you can see that this illustration, we're using higher level thinking to talk about the symbolism of the picture. Okay, we can also, when we look at informational text, we know that students need to be able to look at charts and graphs, infographics, and so forth, and interpret them. And so here's an example of, it says reading for pleasure declines in popularity. And it says average time spent reading for pleasure per day by Americans 15 years and older. And we can see that that decreases. And so the question that you could ask your students is, what is the information that's trying to be gathered? What's the message the creator wants you to know? What are they trying to explain to you? And we can see they're trying to illustrate that reading does go down as a student gets older. And there are good illustrations. You have someone laying on the ground reading a book that shows you what that illustration is about. Now, as students progress, they have to be able to look at charts and graphs and so forth to interpret them and to analyze and critique. And I love statistics and data, and many times data and charts and graphs are misleading. So let's say that you just had a chart like the one on the left where it says test scores before and after a program. It doesn't really give you a lot of information, does it? It's just a chart you can see before and after. Where the other chart has more information, it has the average test score, it has 1 month versus 3 months, and it says data collected before, began, and after 8 weeks. So it's given more information. Sometimes you have to teach students how to interpret data, how to look at the way charts and graphs are labeled and so forth, because people perceptions everything, right? Many times data is presented in a way to purposefully be deceptive, to give so that people will have a perception that the data is interpreted one way instead of another. So let's look now at what the visual literacy standards are. If you work in Florida, you have the Florida Best Standards. I want to show you some standards from the Common Core standards. So let's look at that. So these are some of the standards related to visual literacy in the Common Core standards. In one of your assignments this week, you need to look up the standards in your state. So if you're in Florida, it would be the Florida Best Standards. If you are working in a private school, you need to determine the standards that your private school adheres to, what state. If they don't, then you need to find out, I would just use the state that you're in. What are those state standards? So here is a chart that shows the visual literacy standards and how they're taught. So we can see you in the Common Core standards and the Florida Best standards and almost any standards that you have in reading. You're going to have reading literary and reading informational. And those standards do align. So we can see in kindergarten and second grade, we want students to be able to describe how the illustrations tell the story. How does the picture help us understand what's happening in literary text? So it's pretty simple at that age, but how do the pictures contribute to the story? For reading information, students need to be able to explain how pictures, diagrams contribute to the understanding. So you're going to teach them how to look at pictures, charts, and diagrams, and so forth. So if you were reading a book about snakes, maybe they're going to see a picture of a snake, and it has maybe the different lengths of a boa constrictor compared to a gardener's snake. And so the students could see and interpret that. Now, last week we talked about speaking and listening, and this is really important because visual literacy actually supports speaking and listening because you can use visuals in communication. So we want students in K and 2 to add drawings or visuals or recordings to clarify their ideas. So they need to learn to use those visuals to help as they are speaking and listening. And then last, writing. So we want them to be able to use digital visual tools to publish simple writing. That would be K2. 3 through 5, when we get to literary text, we want the students to explain how illustrations, how do they contribute to mood, tone, and meaning? For informational text in 3 through 5, how can you use information like maps, photographs, charts to understand what that informational text is? For speaking and listening, we want students to add visuals or multimedia to emphasize the main idea and themes. And then for writing, we want them to use graphics and multimedia in their written work to enhance the meaning. Then you get to 6 through 8. So for the reading, we want students to be able to compare and contrast written and visual versions. So maybe they're going to analyze, compare a book with a movie. And Informational text, we want them to integrate information, visual, oral, and even quantitative sources. So this aligns with math too, right? For speaking and listening, use those visual aids strategically as they are speaking. And then in writing, we want them to include visuals, auditory, or video to enhance their presentations. And then you get to 9th through 12th grade. And literary, we want students to represent text across all mediums like film, art, drama, and evaluate those choices that the authors made. For informational text at the high school level, we want to integrate multiple sources, visual, digital, media. We want them to use those to solve problems. In speaking and listening, make purposeful choices for those visuals to help them argue and persuade and to explain their point of view. And then in writing, to integrate those visuals in their written work. And then you can see a little chart here that has how visuals progress. So in K through 2, we're going to use visuals to help with comprehension. 3 through 5, we want to integrate visuals in our speaking and listening, in our writing. In 6th through 8th, we're going to start a visual analysis. So how do these visuals shape meaning? And then lastly, 9 through 12, we want to evaluate multimedia presentations. Okay, so let's get back to what we were talking about earlier. So that was just a little bit about those standards. So here's just some examples of what does that look like. When you do a picture walk, you are promoting those visual standards, right, for those K through 2 kiddos. When you compare illustrations and descriptions, when you analyze films and photo essays, and then lastly, when you at the upper grades in high school, when you ask them to create infographics and multimedia presentations. So why does visual literacy matter? Well, it enhances critical thinking. That's really important. It enhances communication and creativity and comprehension. So those are all very important things. So visual literacy can help in all of these areas. So it's time to look at your assignments this week. So let's go there. Okay, so like we do every week, we're going to start with our module. So we're in module 3. In this module, we're going to start with our aim. So what is it that I hope you will learn this week? We want you to analyze classroom strategies for integrating the language arts with a special emphasis on viewing and visual representing. You're going to be creating an original instructional activity that incorporates visual literacy. And then I want you to reflect on the role of multimodal text in your students. So you have some reading today. So for this week, there are 3 different articles to read. And one is about, more of a website, how to incorporate visual literacy. You have another one on digital citizenship, which is very important. And then how to teach with visuals. And so please look at those. I also have a couple of videos about visual literacy and art and visual thinking and how to promote visual thinking strategies. So that's your reading. What are your assignments? Well, your first assignment for your discussion post is you need to select either one of the articles that I just showed you under the Learn section, or you can pick one of these that I have underneath here. Or if you found something else related to visual literacy, just send it to me so I know. So you need to read the article, and then you need to create some kind of a visual representation. Just one single page where you synthesize everything that you learned from the article, the central thesis, the purpose, the key findings, connection to visual literacy, and then anything that you want to put about the critique and so forth. It could be an infographic, it could be a collage, it could be a digital comic, a story. this is where you can use your creativity to show that you have read the article and synthesized it. Then you're going to post that as your discussion post, and then don't forget to put to respond to one person. So your original post is due Saturday, and then your response is due next week, or I'm sorry, on Tuesday. The other assignment that you have due is you need to investigate the standards at your state that you're in. So it could be the Common Core standards, it could be Florida Best standards, whatever state that you're in. If you are, I know some of you are in a foreign country, you can look at those visual and viewing standards where you teach. Analyze those. How explicitly does the state address visual standards? Are they developmentally scaffolded? Those are some of the things I want you to consider. Are they underdeveloped? Do they prepare students for 2025 and beyond? And then we're going to do another activity about visual representation. So you present your findings in any kind of visual representation that you want. It could be an infographic, it could be a flow chart, it could be a digital concept map, it could be a poster that you draw on paper. Doesn't matter, whatever you want to. And then you're going to write a brief description, 200 to 300 words. That's just maybe a paragraph or so, in which you explain your key takeaways, what surprised you, and how this influences your own teaching. Going to look at go here to, I always like to show you guys your the standards. So let me do that. Actually, not the standards, but the rubric. We're going to start with the end in mind. So the rubric for your assignment this week is, did you thoroughly and accurately analyze multiple relevant standards that demonstrate visual literacy, both viewing and visually representing? Did you offer a critique? Did you create a good layout is visually appealing to support understanding? Your written reflection is connected to teaching. And the reason I put a teaching or advocacy, because many times, we use this visual literacy to support advocacy. So either one. And then, do you have good grammar, correct grammar, design is professional and engaging in professionally appealing. So that's the rubric. So to conclude, this week is on visual literacy. And I wanted to show you one other thing on this little PowerPoint I created here. Okay, so kind of to conclude, so God tells us in his word that he is going to give us wisdom and discernment. And I believe that teaching students how to interpret visual literacy supports that wisdom, supports that discernment. There's so much that our students come across that is not true, it's not accurate, and we need to teach our students wisdom and discernment and how to accurately look at information and interpret that correctly. And so it does align with our faith. So kind of in closing, visual literacy, it helps our students in reading, it helps in oral language, and it just creates the world around them. It helps them to create the world around them because visuals are everywhere. And so we have to be very strategic in making sure that visual literacy is a part of our ELA program. Hey, that's all I have for this week. Don't forget, I always do open office hours on Thursdays, and I'll put the link in this week's announcement. Have a good day.